Be taking the topic the changing nature of regulatory environment, natural environment and new age ethics. This topic is taken from paper code is KMBN 401. Business, as we know, business cannot run without the environment. If we talk about the business, there will be or there is always we can say there is environment that work behind the running of the business. These environment may consist of the different factors like a regulatory environment, natural environment and so on. Today here we will be carrying on with the regulatory environment which are associated with the business. Business is what it is, the regulatory environment, and this is the set of taxes, rules and laws or regulations that businesses must adhere to. Basically, these are the political framing by which the business may work, means they define the boundaries in which the business should work, and they have to follow these boundaries, means restrictions. And these for these regulatory environment, there may be certain authorities or regulatory bodies that may define the different kinds of the regulations for the business or business organizations. The first is the that is the lax regulatory environment, and this environment means relax is it is relaxed environment, and this environment is often associated with the free market. Means here the conservative economics are working and involves there is involvement of the government is very less or very little, means almost they are up to a certain level they are free to practice in the market. They can set their prices as per their own, they can distribute their products, they can manufacture their products as their will or wish by seeing the profitability or revenue generation capacity. But at the same time there may be the other regulatory environment which can be called as the tougher regulatory environment, and generally this environment is associated with progressive economics. Here we can say this type of environment may include the rules that limit the working hours of the employees. There may be the association of the higher taxes, and there may be some other restrictions by which a business may bound. So, lax regulatory environment and tougher regulatory environment, these two kinds of the environment that make the business easier or tougher. Then comes the basic types of regulations. In general, when we talk about the global environment, global business environment, then in general the utmost 6 types of the regulatory environments can be there. These regulations are, the first is the laws which impose burden. There may be certain kinds of taxes like GST, there may be the corporate taxes and other taxes that may be associated with the production of goods or the marketing or the selling of the goods. It means these regulations, these laws they just impose burden on the business organizations, and thus that type of the burden may pass on to the customers itself. Second, regulations may be the laws which directly confer the rights or provide the protection. Many times we can see the quality that is not up to the mark for the consumers, and consumers many times may feel that they are cheated by the companies, by the organizations, or many times they pay more than what they are getting the value. So, at that times the different regulations or different laws are there that help people to protect their rights, or they can raise their voice against these kinds of the practices. Next is the self regulation. Self regulation is the basically this is the third type of regulation, and it is the, we can say it is the best regulation, where there is no regulation bodies, and here the self regulation can work a lot. There may many times we can see there are very less activities in certain areas, in certain industries, where their regulatory body is not required, or the establishment of the regulatory body is quite expensive, because there are too many people, too many systems are involved, and they have to paid by the government or the other bodies. So, in that areas generally organizations are promoted for self regulations, like they should use the ethical practices, they should use the less or more environmental friendly process or the raw materials. So, these kinds of regulations, self regulation, it is promoted where there is less regulatory bodies, or where there is less supervision exist. The number 4 is the licensing bodies. There are some inspectors or the licensing bodies, the departments, when they impose regulations, they come in this category. Generally these kinds of regulations are inspected on routine basis, and after inspection only they have to move ahead, move further. The next activity always can be supported by the past activities. So, the role of these licensing bodies and inspectors are quite important in this for the organizations. There may be certain economic regulations. Economic regulations are the regulations that are associated with the monetary value. Like many times companies may set their prices for the product at the higher level, which is, and many times that may be the wrong, or that may be the malpractice by the organization, while at the same time they are providing the less important or less quality goods. So, many industries are also there where government has restriction to restrictions, and they have capped the prices at the higher prices, at the maximum prices. So, in this kinds of economic regulations, organizations are bound to set their prices as per the regulations prescribed by the government or the bodies. Then there may be the next types of the regulators for the public sector activities. The above regulations, 5 regulations were basically for the private sector activities, but there may be some government organizations, some departments where they work for the public sector, public, and in this sector there may be some certain other kinds of the regulators. So, ultimately there may be the 6 types of the basic types of the regulations. But when we talk about the Indian perspective, in India regulations can be categorized into 3 basic categories, means there are 3 classes in which Indian economy is working. The first is the economic regulation. Economic regulation, what we have already told you in last slide, these kinds of regulations are made to prevent or tackling the market failures. Many times markets are not working enough, and there may be the malpractices by the different competitors, different the companies, so as to make more profits. At that time economic regulations work. There is second category in India, regulations in the public interest. So, these kinds of regulations have the scopes where industries are failing to meet a standard or uphold something of public importance. If companies are working for the public importance, public cause, at that time they have to meet certain standards, and those standards are made by the organization, made by the state, and for the business to follow them, so as to give the maximum satisfaction or the keeping the maximum interest of the public. The third category that is majorly followed by the India, that is the environmental regulation. In environmental regulation, we can say that in today's era there is too much exploitations of the natural resources, and these natural resources may be the crude oil, the petroleum, it may be the wood, it may be the soil, the gases, and there may be the location, land. So, all these comes under the environmental regulations. There may be the food grains also. So, when we talk about the environmental regulations, then these kinds of the regulations covers actions, different actions of the business to protect the environment from harm. Means many times the gas emissions levels are decided to by the chemical factories, so as to prevent the harm to the environment. Like this, there may be several other examples that may be that may be here there to make the protection of the water, to make the protection of the lands, etc. So, a regulatory environment may have its own advantages or disadvantages. More or less they are having the advantages like better working conditions. If in the businesses we talk about the regulatory environment, it may be associated with different factors, and those factors may be proved as an advantage of the to the different stakeholders. They may provide the better working conditions to their employees, so as to take care of their health. They may protect the human rights. They also can work the avoidance of the business monopolies in the area where there is the single company, and at that time the company may exploit more and more resources, and they can offer the product at higher prices. So, these regulations just are there just to avoid the business monopolies. Many times there are the assurance of the tax revenue. The regulatory environment also help the government to collect the tax revenues as per the regulations that has been set to the for the business organizations. There may be some safety improvements related regulations, and these regulations are there just to provide the safety to the working people in the factories, in the companies, or in the offices, or in the field. In this case, there may be the environment related to the water, the proper lighting, proper air, like this. These regulations are crucial for the energy transition process. Many times these processes are also important. So, regulations can be there. Working transportation systems, how the transportation system should work, for this also there is regulations. There may be the assurance of minimum qualification levels for the working people in the factories, in different places. Many the regulations may provide the social security to the poorest among us who are the poor. The regulations always support those people. Health improvement for the general public. For general public, if there is the harm to their health, then these regulations may be there to protect their health. There may be the important for the sophisticated economic framework. For the economies also the regulations are helpful. At the same time, they also may help the environment in many ways, and the regulations may work positively in holding the people accountable for their actions. So, these are the pros or the advantages or the positive aspects of the regulations for which we can say there must be regulatory environment for business organizations, but at the same time there may be some disadvantages or the cons that may be that should be studied. The regulations may be the time consuming, the follow up of the regulation, the setting up of the different kind of regulations may be tedious task, and therefore, it may be time consuming. Many people may be there to work to set the environment for the inspection, for other activities. So, there may be the large amount of administrative work, there may be the plenty of control necessary. There should be there should be the different control measures, and that is why the plenty of control is there. Many times small businesses may suffer by the regulations that are being set for them for the business environment. Then comes regulations can be a costly affair, and for that purpose many organizations may not follow it. Regulation may be it should be flawless, but if there are the flawed regulations and they may affect negatively in more quantity than the positive aspects. Innovations and technology progress may be slowed down, because of the regulations the organizations may not go with the newer technology, or they may not go with the innovations just because of the regulatory environment. High level of regulations may hurt the competitiveness of a country. If there are more and more regulations, then surely there may be the competitiveness of the country, of the business environment, of the business organizations may at lower side. Regulations are vulnerable to lobbying activities. Regulation always help and support for the lobbying activity of the different people, different organizations. Overall level of freedom may suffer for the organization. If many times they need freedom, they need the relaxation from the regulations, so that they can give the most out of it to their consumers. At the same time, people may not tolerate certain regulations. Many times they may revoke to certain kinds of regulations, and they may not tolerate at all. The regulations may depend on the preference of the politicians. In India or the different nations, there may be different kinds of parties, and they have different opinions for the businesses or the working or the activities of the businesses. So, at that time different politicians may have different kinds of regulations for the business environment, for the businesses. So, generally these are the preferences, which is the negative aspect of the business environment. Then comes penalties may be subject to high level of the discretion. It means different organizations may have different kinds of penalties, and that may be different for the different organizations. So, these kinds of the negative aspects may hurt the real spirit of the regulatory environment. Now, we are moving with the business and natural environment. Businesses are always running in the natural environment or natural surroundings. If we are assuming the environment, the business organization's office or business organization's factories or the different aspects, then there may be the land, there may be different kinds of air type, there may be the use or usage of the water, different usage of the wood. It means the metal, the oil. When we talk about different manufacturing raw materials or different requirements of the business organizations, then there is the natural environment, and these natural environment is basically what? It is the group of natural resources that can be used by the businesses. कहने का ये मतलब है कि बिजनेस बिना नेचुरल एनवायरनमेंट के नहीं हो सकता है. You have to take the support of the natural resources. If you are making the chips, you are supplying the chips to the customers, then you have to take care of the potatoes or the other agricultural goods. So, natural environments are there always when working with the organizations. In business, when we use the term the natural resources, many businesses many times they use it in out of limit, the limitless use. So, at that time natural environment may damage, means the the level of the environment may change, they may extinct over time, and to for that extinction there may be certain kinds of the regulations. In last slides we have already discussed it. Now, it is the perspective of the business to help those resources which are used without any limit, and they have to stop the misuse of those natural resources, and by those kinds of activities they can protect their natural environment. And natural environment may be just like raw material, the quality and availability of the inputs and the products, waste assimilation or the risk protection. It means natural businesses always run and they have different association with the nature on these 4 parameters. Basically, for the raw material they are dependent on the nature, like cotton, water, crops, crude oils, and there may be other resources that are helpful for the organization to run the business, to manufacture their final goods, to offer it to the consumers. At the same time, the quality and availability of the inputs and the products. See, raw materials are required and they are the ultimate requirements. Without these raw materials the organization cannot run, but at the same times there may be different kinds of other inputs or other products that may be required by the businesses, like water purification, filtering of pollutions, nutrients formations. It means the positive aspects are the raw materials, the negative aspects are associated with the quality and availability of the inputs. Purification is required for the water, for the pollutants, for the nutrients, and at the same time there may be the third kind of the activity, waste assimilation, and waste assimilation again require the nature, because it is the nature that that break down the different waste products that may be generated by the organizations, and they again they dilute the emissions of those waste products. At the same times there is the next activity, which is the risk protection, and that can be given by the nature itself. There is the, if there are more and more trees, there may be flood protection, mitigating the impacts of climate change. What is this? Means there are natural disasters that can be protected by the natural environment, and these disasters may affect negatively the business workings or business organizations. So, every business need to support the natural environments. There may be different impact of the natural environments on the business. It may provide the different sources for the raw materials for the organizations. There is the mainstay of agriculture, because agriculture cannot be done without the land or without the nature. Industry location is again important aspect, and this is again the main part, the important part of the natural environment, natural surroundings. Employment generation or the foreign exchange earner, these are again the impact of the natural environment. Nature again influence the basis of the transportation and communication. If there is a road, then road transportation can be used, but if there is no road, there is no land, and there is water route, then you have to go with the ships or other modes like this. And communication is also there, that can be impacted by the natural environment. Basically, it is the key to human life. Human life cannot be survived, cannot have their imagination, their survival without the nature environment. And again finally, there can be different demand patterns, and that also may be affected by the natural environments. Natural environments means where there are cold environment, there is hot environment. In both environment there are different kinds of the demands can be generated. So, demand pattern may be different just due to the different types of the natural environment. And every business need to have to work in the ethical environment. Ethics are generally the code of conduct that applies to the business and its employees. Business ethics is nothing but that drives the code of conduct, and basically these are nothing but the set of the moral principles. So, all these principles should be followed, and then the business can run with the ethics. And in the new era, the ethics in the business can be seen in the data protection, it can be seen if for the customer prioritization. Again, ethics should be there for the workplace diversity. There may be different whistleblower in the company, and they should be protected, and they should be worked with the new way, so that they can be proved the powerful asset of the organization. Again, there should be corporate transparency, so that the information can be flowed in the right direction. Again, community outreach should be there, so that the every person can have the proper interaction with the organizations. There should be environmental awareness among the employees, so that they can protect, they can work towards protecting the environment. And there are employee compensation, that is again the ethical part of the organizations these days, and every business need to work on these ethics, so as to make the good or the efficient business environment. These are the references with which we can go through. Thank you. Very soon we will be coming with the next topic.